We're learning Perek Hey Halacha Chav Gimel, Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. Chav Gimel, Kli Mateches, a metal vessel or a stone vessel, Shenishtavish ben Chametz V'Roischin, that was used for Chametz when it was hot, like a Kli Rishon. We'll go down to the Peirush. Kigoyin Kederois V'Alafsa. These are big pots that you cook in them on the fire, and that's called kli rishon because anything that stands on the fire is a kli rishon. It's considered the first place where the fire reaches. You can kasher it by putting it into a big vessel of water, and you fill it up over above the level of the pot, and you heat it up until they will give off the chametz that's absorbed in it. And then you have to cool it off with cold water. And then you can use it to bake matzah. Now the Magen Mishnah cites, that's what we find in the Rif. The klal, when you kash a kelim for Pesach, is anything that's made from wood or metal or any type of metal, iron or metal, or stone that was used the whole year for chametz as a kli rishon. So you have to boil them out. That's called agolon, a kli rishon. And what you use as a kli sheni means like a soup bowl. You take the soup is cooked on the fire, and the kli sheni is where you take from the soup and pour it into another vessel. There, it's enough to pour hot water on them because that's the way they're used, by pouring soup into them on chametz. So the heat level is the same, and therefore whatever's in there would be removed. You leave the hot water that he placed upon them until they will give off all that they've absorbed, and it's okay. The Rif cites that when a person wants to be machshir a vessel that a goy used to cook nevela and treifa, this is the same halacha applies. And so the Hagos Maimonides brings from the Gemara in Avodah Zorah 75b. The kelim that are used on the fire itself, like a spits that you roast animals on the fire. It doesn't help hagola cooking them out in water, cook it in boiling water, but that you have to have fire, because the rule is that in the same fashion that they absorb, so they give off what they've absorbed, or they burn it off. And therefore, if it was used on the fire directly, it has to be removed by fire. And if it was used by water, by cooking, then it can be done through cooking. Now, why do you have to wash it with cold water after the hagolah? So the Magen Mishnah says, the Rambam says afterwards you cool it down with water and use it for matzah. According to some of the Mefarshim, the Gemara in Zvachim 97a, it says there that you heat it up in hot water and you cool it with cold water. Because it says in the Torah, that there's two actions: there's the cooking and the washing. Those are saying Mariko means that you do in hot water. Shoitfa means in cold water, like the Rambam. That after you kash the kli in hot water, you have to cool it down with cold water. Those saying Shoitfa b'tzayin is, it means that you have to remove to cleanse the vessel before you cook it up. The Hagos Mach has a question. Why do you need shtifa after the Hagolah? Only kelim that you had kochim, supposedly it requires this washing. The chometz, there's no extra place to learn that you need to wash it down. And he adds that if the reason that you have to wash it down is because after the water rests the kli goes ahead and gives off again, it doesn't sound right. Rae Gann explains that the rinsing is done after the agolo to take off anything that has been given off by the vessel into the water. Therefore, when you rinse it off, you're rinsing away whatever's on the outside, and therefore you rinse it. And therefore, he says, if you're machmir to do so, it's praiseworthy. You'll get a bracha. But he asks a question. The Rambam should have said you have to do a good job of it. And it concludes that those who are of the opinion that you have to wash it did la halacha, because we learned this from a pasuk that's the way you do hagolo. You do boiling out, because you boil it out and then you rinse it. Now, what do you do with kli even, stone vessels? Rae Gann says all the goyim and the rabbonim say that stone and metal are the same, can both be kashered by cooking, by boiling, except for Rabbeinu Tam. Some of the rabbonim tzvas that say the kli avonim have a din like kli cheres, which are earthenware pots, that you cannot kasher them with boiling water. There's a certain proof to the Rambam from the Mishnah Masech the Kelim Teos Kahanim, the Tano of Evan Shamateches Toyo Shum Tano V'Tomei Mishum Kli Mateches. That we find the Tano of Evan, if they then the Torah doesn't become a Tano. It's not a Tano which mentioned Yutat, it has to be broken. It's Tomei because of Kli. Kiro shel Evan Mishum Mateches is Tomei Mishum Kli Mateches. And a kiro of Evan Mateches is also Tomei because of a Kli. So you see the Kli Evan is like Kli Mateches. It's made of, it's like stone is made similar to metal and not to earthenware. And the minig is that we do kasher it. So the Torah brings there's no difference between a vessel of wood or stone or metal or iron, and their laws are equal that you can do with boiling. Am Yitzchak Misimponing writes that Kli Alolim, they used to make out of dung, they used to make vessels. Kli Avonim is enough to rinse them off. You don't even need Hagol B'Roischim. The Rav Haigoin in Tshuva writes that Kli Alolim, Kli Avonim, if you use it for hot water, it doesn't help with eating them, because they are similar to kli cheres. You have to heat them in a tanur until they will become red hot, white hot. Ilvis makes them all the same. Shitas Ram is Geshitas Arif. How long should they stay in the water? And so Ram says he fills it up, and it stays there until it gets off. Now, how do you measure that? We find in Halacha Chavdalad by Kli Sheni, and so the Rif and the Tur saying, Mi yodei l'shai shia plito kamazman. How do you know? Ulai, maybe you should leave it too long, and they take back what they've given off. And he adds that the minig is to put them in for a very brief time and take them right out. You do not have to leave them in the water till they will give off like Keshitas Rambam V'Ariv. Halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Aruch is found. It doesn't matter whether it's a wooden vessel or a stone vessel or a metal vessel, they can all be kashered b'agolo. Like the Rambam adds also a kli etzem. If it's a bone, it's made out of bone like ivory, it can be kashered with boiling water. Machava continues in Tufnun Beis 452. If he leaves the kelim in the water more and he needs to, or he doesn't, or he has to be careful not to leave the water stop boiling. Therefore, you shouldn't leave it for a long time. The Mishnah Berurah explains that he's not concerned that it'll take back what it had outside, because we're doing it before the time of the Isser, before Shor HaMishas. You cannot kasher after Shor HaMishas, because if there's even a drop left after kashering, it would be Osir. But once it became bottled before Chatzos of Erev Pesach, then it's okay. Machabes is further that the minig is to rinse with cold water after the Hagolah immediately. The Be'agodah says this is again for the idea that what was exported from the vessel should not be reabsorbed. And the Mishnah Berurah says, even if you didn't wash it off, it's okay, because you're doing it before the time of the Issa, before the 5th hour. And of course, you have to wait 24 hours before you can kasher from chametz to matzah. Now, what do you do with knives? The knives also, you cook it up in a kli rishon, the handle with a knife, and then you can use it in matzah. Rabbeinu Menachos says, shalav is the barzel, is the metal part of the knife. The nitziv is the handle, and it's called so because it makes the metal stable, so you can cut it. You have a handle for it. And it brings from the posting and shreiftim vayovi gam hanetziv achar lav. So Loshen Ha'amar lav and netziv is the posuk. That this is the handle, as we said before, and we learned it from the posuk in shreiftim. The Maggid Mishnah cites psochim. Ravina asked Rav Ashi, how can you machshir on Pesach knives that use them for chametz? And he told him that you have to put the metal in fire, and the handles, which are made of wood, they shouldn't be burned. You should cover it with tit, and then you take off the tit from the handles, and you put everything into hot water. The Gemara concludes the halacha is that even the handle and the knife you can do in hot water in a kli rishon, like the Rambam. You don't need to have libun eish on a knife, even though the knife is sharp. Agoras Maimonides cites that the Rashbam paskins you need to boil the handles and to do libun, burn off the metal, like Rav Ashi. Menach has the question, why do you need Hagolah by Sakinim b'kli rishon? They're only used for chametz only in a kli sheni. So why should you need to have the Hagolah at all? And it's even less than kli sheni because you don't do it with something which is very hot, which is cooked on the fire. And the answer is, at times you cut meat in a plate when the meat is very, very hot, and therefore it's like using it in a kli rishon. Or sometimes you put the knife into the meat when it's still in the oven or on the fire. Therefore, it's called a kli rishon. That's why you would have to do Hagolah, boil it off. Questions: what if that's the case? You should need libun as well. Maybe it's like a spit, right? Because he uses it like to turn over the meat. The answer is, since it's not usually done that way, you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, questions from the Yerushalmi in Avodah Zarah, that a long knife has to have libun. It would seem that you do roast meat on a knife. And he brings from the Sifri, and so the Ravid says, as well as Tosfos and Psochim, the sakin that has Isser in it of Goyim, it takes in a lot, but by chametz, usually you don't take the sakin and you don't stick it in the bread. So even though you stick it in the meat, that doesn't make it chametz stick. The only thing that makes it chametz stick is when you stick it in bread. And in bread, you don't use it on the fire itself. And he brings proof to this from Hilchos Chametz, that by kli goyim, he writes that sakin needs libun, and only by chametz, he says it's enough to have boiling and not libun, which is burning it off. And so we find the Magen Mishnah that the spits that you put on the meat or other types of trays or reshet is a screen that you put underneath the meat to hold it over the fire. We all know they did in the Gemara by Chametz Pesach. The Mefarshim disagree. There are those who say it's like other Yisurim and you need libun because you use it on the fire. And there are those who say that even since they absorbed heter, it's enough to do hagola. For there is an opinion that chometz is different from all Yisurim because at the time when you use it, it's not iser, it's heter. But a kli, a vessel that you cook it in the chometz, baking in chometz all year, that's a davar mutter, and therefore hagola would be enough. You don't need libun in a kli. The Magen Mishnah says that this is what the Rambam's thoughts are possibly. He mentions us by knives that you do boiling, and he says from what the Rambam says by chometz in the knife, it's enough hagola by moischem. He says you need to have, when you take a knife from a goy, you need to burn it, the metal. Thus we must conclude that the Rambam makes a differentiation between chometz, which is heter when it is absorbed, to other yisurim. He says by other yisurim many times you use it like a spit, and therefore it's also chometz you never use in that situation. And he adds that the Rambam and the Rashba equalize chometz to what you have to boil kelim from goyim, and even by goyim it would be enough to boil rather than to do libun. Halacha l'maaseh, the Shulchan Aruch says knives you can boil in a kli rishon and they can be used. A kli rishon means it's being heated on the fire, in water is in it and it's boiling, even though, and sometimes even if it's not on the fire, if it's still boiling. But before you do this cleansing process for kashering, you have to make sure that it is clean, take off any rust or dirt, and therefore if it has holes, you can't clean them, it doesn't help. He adds further, the hagola, the vessels in boiling give off what they have in it. We find the lotion in Iyov, shoyroi iber v'lo yagil. The Pasuk is talking about the Dor HaMabul, that the brocha, they had very much brocha, and then they sinned till HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the whole world. It says shuru iber, that all the oxen were, they did not, they all conceived and they never lost their embryos. The Mechaber continues, kelim, vessels, they use them on the fire, such as spits and these types of trays. They need libun, they have to be burnt out. And that means it has become so hot till if you scratch it, you'll have fire jumping from it. The Rambam says, there are those who are lenient, if it becomes hot enough so that if you put a straw on it, it will be burnt. And we're not like this in everything that has to do with libun. But if something that needs only boiling, but it has cracks, and therefore you can't do boiling, then it's enough if the metal of the knife would be heated up to a point where if you put straw on it, the straw would burst into fire.